Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kingdom Concepts. We have Aleya and Bianca here. We are doing the month of March, and we're talking about family and how it pertains to ministry and the local church. And so today we're going to be talking about what to do when change comes. If you've served in any capacity or you've been at church for longer than a year, you know that change happens. And change a lot of times can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like you don't want to do it, but then there's also times where God's saying, hey, it's time for some change. And we want to talk about how do you navigate that and what do you do when those types of changes come?
Yeah, I think sometimes when it comes to change, people just get very uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were comfortable a certain way. Things were always a certain way. So they get comfortable and then change comes and then all of a sudden they're out of their routine and they're no longer comfortable, right? Yep. That's the issue.
And sometimes that can cause you to push forward into things you've never been able to do before and to see yourself walking out things using gifts that you've never had to utilize before. But also sometimes that pressure can cause people to fall and to crumble and to not live up to what, God has in front of them. Anytime promotion's coming, anytime it's that new season, time to step into that next threshold, the Bible talks about going from glory to glory, you will always see some sort of a pruning take place. I know that anytime our church has hit that next level growth, you see certain people, they're just not ready to go forward. And they will decide that, hey, well, I don't want to go forward. I don't want bigger ministry. I don't want more responsibility. And they'll fall by the wayside. They'll remove themselves out of ministry. But, you also have some people to where they see that challenge and they'll push through in that uncomfortableness. They'll step up and they'll step out. Yeah. And anytime you go up, you do have to have that step out. And for people who are faithful in ministry, people who that they treat ministry like that's my baby. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable, like in a sense of like, well, I don't want to because what will happen if I leave? Yeah. Like if I not leave like the church, but what happens if I leave this area and step into something new? Yeah. And I know that I had a experience in that when I was youth pastoring for almost, I think we were about 9 years, almost 10. And I had started youth pastoring right out of high school. When I was about 17, I started kind of stepping towards more responsibility, preaching more regularly in youth. And my promotion, I think, kind of went into a little bit of a default situation because, there was nobody. And so, when you've been faithful in doing other things, God will He will advance you, and it might come in the package of a default, but when you already have, when you're doing the right thing, you're ready. You're ready to take on that challenge. God will grace you for it. And so I remember I was doing that for a long time, and then it got to the point where, about 9 years where I knew this is not mine anymore. There's another area the ministry needs me, and there's another area that, my parents were wanting me to develop and to cultivate and to take more of a responsibility higher up to where I can manage more things. And I remember I was telling you, for about, it was like a year, right? We were just praying and like, and I would tell you like, I have this yearning for this next step, but I don't see anybody that could do what I'm doing. And I was just like, I don't know what to do. And nobody had approached me that they wanted to do youth. And I just had this uneasiness. And it wasn't a God uneasiness. It was a self-type, I put that on myself. I was like, this is my baby. Like, what if somebody breaks it and you have all this? And I remember my dad telling me, listen, like when it's time for you to promote, sometimes it's going to take more than one person to fill your shoes. Yeah. And he had, told me the story when he was youth pastoring and it was time for him to step into a different level. And I think it took about like 6 people. He had to leave the department into 6 different hands so that he could do what he was going to do. And I remember that just kind of brought peace to me. And then it was like, okay, well, who you're going to bring? Because this scripture, I want to just read the scripture real quick, and then I want to turn it over to you. And 1 Samuel 17, and this is in the Amplified. So 1 Samuel 17, verse 20, it says this. It says, so David got up early in the morning, left the flock with the keeper, picked up the provisions, and went just as Jesse had directed him. And he came to the encampment as the army was going out in battle formation, shouting the battle cry. Now, you might be like, what does that have to do with anything? This portion of scripture is right before David's going to walk into his destiny. Right before he takes that step to go slew Goliath. Slay. Right before he's going to go slay Goliath, this is what's happening. And I always focus, and so this is what I actually stood on before I moved out of youth department, was this part where he says that he got up early and left the flock with the keeper. And I've always ministered that, you know what, when God's going to move you into that next level, it's still a responsibility to make sure what you were just in is covered.
Yeah.
And I was like, Lord, bring that keeper, bring that person, because I've seen people do ministry they want to promote for the hurt of the ministry, not for the betterment of the ministry, not for the advancement of the ministry, but it causes a hurt in the ministry. How many times have you seen people, well, I want to leave this department and I want to go, and it's like, no other department will benefit from you on it if you're leaving the children to have nobody, you know? And so I'm like, this is a good example. He was going to step into the new, and he made sure there was a keeper. Yeah. And I remember when we were in this place, you came to me one day out of the blue, and I love the revelation God gave you.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had several conversations about who was going to take your place. And I remember these conversations, and you're right, it was probably a full year of you would come to me, we'd be together, and you would say, what about this person? And you'd drop a name. And then I'd be like, I don't know. And then, we would talk it out. And then the next month you'd bring me another name and you'd be like, what about this person? Oh, I don't know. And it was like that for a full year of just, well, what about this person? Would this work? And so I remember one day I was just, I think I was driving and I just saw myself ministering to the youth. And that wasn't something new, and it wasn't some grand, like, I had this vision, I wouldn't say it was like that. It wasn't some grand moment. And I had already ministered in youth. You would have me guest minister. I was already a youth leader. You would have me minister on occasions, especially when you were out for maternity leave. I was usually the person to stand in for you.
Which I was on maternity leave during this coming up.
Yeah, so you would be like, I'm out for these months. Can you cover me? And so it's not that youth ministry was unfamiliar to me. I was already doing it. But there was just something that dropped in my spirit, like, this could be you. You could do this. You could do this. And we had already had so many conversations and gone over so many names. So I remember I called you because I had been sitting on it. Sometimes you sit on things. You're like, and I had just been sitting on it. And so I remember I just called you one day and I was like, Aleya, I saw myself ministering. I saw myself youth pastoring. I was like, and I don't know. I don't know what happens from here, but I just thought I would tell you that I'll do it. And it's kind of like how you said, I wouldn't say that I was a default, but you and I have all of our lives have served wherever we needed to serve. Yes. If there was a need in children's church, we were at children's churches. There was a need behind the camera, we were behind the camera. Yes. So Lord help us.
Cameraman, thank you. With that big old thing, and I was panning choppy, but your girl was the first cameraman.
Yes, we would turn that camera and go awful footage, but we were there
nonetheless.
Yes, and we were there to fill a need. There was no one else to stand behind that camera, so it was us. So we've had experience in every different ministry, but it didn't feel like a default this time. It didn't feel like well, there's no one else, so I'm going to do it. It felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. This is where I'm supposed to be. And so we started making that transition. I remember you asked me, well, what about Justin? Because I was already married at that time. And so me and Justin came into agreement on that, and we just kind of stepped into that role. And I think it's been 3 years. Yes. I'm pretty sure it's been 3 years or something like that.
You're going into 4 because Liam's going to be 4.
Yeah.
And it just all happened, that transition happened officially after I had him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what was so great is exactly what you said is there's times, and I think it's understanding your season. Now, that's such a Christian word is when you talk about that. We were joking about that. When you talk about the seasons, because some people use it as an excuse to just quit their commitment. They talk about the seasons, and I remember I heard a minister, he said, listen, you go through 4 seasons in a year and you never move your house. Like, you don't move your house just because you're in a new season. And he's like, but so many Christians think they could just throw out the, for this season. He's like, and then it just breaks commitment. That's really what they're trying to do, is break commitment. So let me preface it with, that is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is there are seasons where when you're growing in ministry, when you're growing up in ministry, when you're getting planted in ministry, where you do like what we just discussed, where you serve where there's a need, or you serve in a place where your gift can be utilized. And as you do that, the Lord is shaping you. He's shaping you. He's molding you. As you sit under that pastor, what he's preaching, that's shaping you, that's molding you. That's why it's so important that you sit in service as well, that you listen to those messages. If you're running a type of department where you are doing something every time, okay, well, when you leave church, you still need to hear that message. Throughout the week, you need to hear that message. But while you're doing that, you're getting shaped and molded for the ministry God has for you, that thing that only you can do. And then you'll find yourself hitting that point, just like what you said, where you see yourself doing what God created you to do, which was, that youth pastoring for you, is you seeing, this wasn't hey, there's a need, fill it, because I was going to continue doing it until that right person came. And it was you stepping into a destiny. It was you stepping into, this is what I'm doing. And the great thing is that you were able to do it with Justin. Yeah. See, I didn't get that opportunity because of Mark's occupation. He's a cop. He does other things for the ministry. He serves my dad. But youth pastoring was more of a solo thing for me, which is great. He helps with the kids and all that. I'm not trying to say it different. Every ministry is going to look different, but you and Justin doing it together was something so fresh that our youth of our ministry had now a male in there as well. Yeah. And it's fruitful. You're seeing that change. Yeah. And it's just been so great to watch.
And then there was a part of it too where once I stepped into that position, because that position is a department head position. Yeah. So I remember you asking me to step down from other ministries because you were like, listen, now you're a department head. You're not just serving, you're a department head, which means you're going to have to put down some other things. And I had to be okay with that. I had to be okay with that. And I had to listen to that wisdom and be okay with, not serving on the worship team anymore and putting some things down. And I think that when it comes to change, you need to trust your leadership. You need to trust the people who God has put in those places, because otherwise you're going to hurt the ministry or you're going to be hurt. And so the best thing that you can do in a season of change is for you to listen to your leadership.
So true. If God puts you in a place, if he's planted you there, if he's made that pastor your pastor, then they're going to see a bigger picture than what you're going to see. Now, that's not always the case. Now, when I was doing youth, I was serving in other ministries. I think I did worship for a brief bit because you see, you need to fill it. And then when there was other people who filled it, I was like, I'm out. It's not my thing. But I served in children's church as well as youth pastoring. But it came to the point by the time it was the handoff where those youth were at a place where they needed more consistency. They needed a full-time thing. So that for our ministry, we needed that position available. Whereas you may be in a different church where you can do multiple things at the same time. But for us, we knew that you were going to reach a point where you couldn't go further if your commit was split. But again, you were stepping into what you were made to do. And there's a difference with that. Yeah. You expand to that ministry. It really is such an amazing feeling.
It's true. Because as a youth pastor, I've been stretched in different ways than I ever was in other positions just serving. Being a department head has certain leadership roles. When there's fires, you have to put them out. When, there's something that needs to be addressed, you have to address it. And if you knew anything about me, I don't like that. But that's just some ways that I needed to stretch and grow. And your dad always says that anything that is alive is growing. Yes. Anything that's living is growing. And the local church, ministry, those things should be alive. Yes. And that means they have to grow and they have to change. And it comes down to a choice. You come to this point where are you going to grow and change with it? Or are you just going to sit back and let your walk with God get stagnant, let your gifts get stagnant? Or are you going to grow? Are you going to keep being alive? You know what I mean?
Keep investing in yourself. I know so many people who are, like I said, the best way to learn is by other people's examples, what they do right, what they do wrong. I think one of the dumbest phrases is, well, I learned something, or like I have no regrets because it's brought me to where I am. I'm like, oh, I have regrets. If I knew better and I still did it, like, yeah, I regret that. I should, like, I'm not talking about shame. Don't put shame on you that God, Jesus paid for that price on the cross. But no, if I knew better and I still did something, no, yeah, I regret that. I think the best way to learn is through other people's examples, what they did right, what they do wrong. That's how Jesus taught. He taught in parables. And I've seen so many people when that door of opportunity, that promotion came to them, they were not ready for the pushback the enemy was going to bring to them. You know what? When David walked up there, what we were talking about, and he was going to go towards Goliath, he knew he was stepping in the right thing. But when Goliath started speaking back, when the people even behind David were not right there pushing David, right there with David, that type of, what is it called? Like that type
resistance,
of, yeah, that type of resistance. Some people fold in that. Some people fail in that. I've watched people, the moment they step towards, especially a ministerial type position, and they're not ready for what's coming at them, because the devil's not going to say, oh, you know what? Yeah, let them step into their destiny. Go ahead, let them, do this. No, he's going to push back. He's going to fight back. And when you're solid with God and you continue to make the investment into your life, you'll be able to withstand that, because greater is he that is in you than he that's in the world. But I know people who they stepped into that ministerial position and they could not handle the heat. They wanted to, and they pulled themselves back. And they're no longer, to this day, I can think of so many couples that are not living in the place that God had for them. Full on to where it took them back all the way into backsliding. Not just, well, I'm going to come back to this level down here. No, it went full on. When you're outside of God's will, when you're not in obedience, it pushed them all the way into backsliding. And it was, like, I've seen it be in brief moments. Youth pastors that got put in, and after 2 months, their marriage went to shambles. Their kids went to shambles. Their serving went to shambles. They left. And why? It wasn't just because all of a sudden their marriage went bad. No, it was because the enemy came and they didn't like the pressure that came. And then they went away from the thing that got them into that position. And they went into themselves. And that's not how, that you can't work that way.
And I think sometimes that resistance to change, I'm so sorry. I know this is going to sound rough, but it's a small-minded mentality. Because a ministry with a vision, there's no room for small minds in a ministry with vision. And so what happens is some people get stuck in this area of, well, I like how small this church is. I like that the pastor gets to talk to me every week. I don't want more people to come because then I won't get that one-on-one, intimate, individual.
Christian words.
And they can't see that vision because their minds are so small. And so they don't have the minds to fathom those domes that your dad has in front of us as that vision, that huge, thousands of people. They can't picture that because they don't want to. They want to stay where they are.
And if you can't picture it, then you can't see yourself participating in it. If you cannot picture it in your mind, you can't latch onto it. It can't become yours. And there's, like what you said, it's that small mind will always keep you from going head on the battle. That small mind will always keep you contained. And when you're out of alignment, you start to walk with it. I was just talking to one of our guys who works here, and he was telling me yesterday that his dog, a little Pomeranian, slept weird, which I didn't even know animals could do this, but the dog slept weird. And then he said it woke up like hunchback, and it was like Quasimodoing it around the house. And you know what? That's what happens when you're out of alignment. The evidence of it is so apparent. And it's the same thing when it comes to ministry. When change comes, if you do not align yourself with where God's trying to take your family, take the ministry, your family will show the evidence of you being out of alignment. It will. It will become evident to you. It'll become evident to other people. And the good thing about God is you can always make that adjustment. You can always get to that Holy Spirit chiropractor and let him work that out. But a lot of times people don't like that. And when I stepped out of youth and I, took up that position of the chief operating officer, one of the things that when my first meeting, when I got all the department heads, and then we made executive directors as well, and I got all the staff together, and I told them this, and I believe we even put it in our manuals. You will not go far if you ever say the words, that's not how we used to do it. And remember, I said, no, these are words I will never hear you guys say. And if you say these words, we're going to have a talk, because that's not this ministry. This ministry will never say that's not the way we used to do it, because it's small-minded, and you're going to resist change, and you're going to become that hunchback. And our church is not walking around hunchback, baby. Like, you got to align yourself, or you're going to move to the side, Quasimodo. We're going forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're not going to operate in what worked yesterday. That's
so
not
good.
How it works.
Yes,
that's not
so
how
good.
ministry works. We can't operate in what worked yesterday. And so
that's so good.
That, we're in a church and a ministry that's alive. It's growing. It's moving forward. Not because we're trying to stay relevant. Not because we're trying to keep with the times. No, we just understand that something that's alive is growing. And we're going to get better. We're not going to move backwards.
And the Bible talks about God doing a new thing. He always talks about doing a new thing. When it went from, Saul to David, he looked nothing like the package before, but it was what was God's will. And so I wrote that down. Change in ministry doesn't always come packaged the way you assume it would.
Yeah.
It doesn't always come packaged that way. I had my mindset on when youth was going to be transitioned. I was like, well, we're going to need a man. I hope it's a man doing it, because I don't want my leaders to hold this. If it's a woman, they're going to be like, well, Leigh didn't do it that way, or this is what we're used to. And that's me thinking that. That's me thinking that this leadership I have is no way mature enough to handle this, when that wasn't even my leaders. That was mentality from stinking thinking people trying to come on me, and I'm trying to protect the ministry from change. And that's not how that works. It is not my job to protect the ministry from change. It is my job to use my gifts to fulfill the vision of the house. And if somebody has that stinking thinking, then they don't belong in that position anyways. Because small minds can never do big things. Right?
And I think that small-mindedness, there's a root of selfishness there too.
That is so true, you guys.
It's this root of, I like where things are here. I want things done how I like them. I like how this ministry is serving me right now, how, this size that it is. And so there's this I mentality that starts happening when you have that small-mindedness, instead of thinking, if we were bigger, if we did things better, we would reach more people. And that should be our heart, because the heart of Jesus is people. So our heart needs to be people. It's not about what makes us comfortable.
And I think it's important to know, when we were doing all these changes, not just changes, even like as you were serving, like you were serving in worship team, I was serving in youth, and and then wherever else needed it, we were building families at the same time. I mean, I was pregnant, I don't know how many of the years I did youth, I had my own stall. I threw up almost every time. Remember, before youth, I'd be in the stall. Oh, there's Aleya throwing up in the stall. I'd wipe my mascara, and then I'd get on that stage and preach. It's just what it was. I mean, we made a few adjustments. I mean, they stopped serving chili beans because they knew at one point, here I am throwing up in a trash can because of the smell from the youth food. And then I had like 2 leaders next to me doing the same thing. Remember
throwing
James?
Up because you
James
were throwing
was throwing
up.
up because I was throwing up, and it's like, listen, you just do. Ministry may look different as you're growing your family, or as you're growing in whatever avenue applies to you, but it's still doable. It's still possible. It doesn't just stop, but you have to be okay with those changes. And I remember, for me, I'm a mission trip person. Like, my husband and I, we got married with a small wedding, just so we could go to Africa together, and we put all of our money towards Africa. So our honeymoon was a mission trip in Africa, third world country in the bush. We were not resorting it. I mean, the most resort we got was that funky heart-shaped bed at the hotel. But I remember when I started having kids, the next mission trip I was 5 months pregnant. I went to the Philippines. And I remember I got out of the car to go. I had a doctor note. And Pastor Juan looked at me and he goes, oh, I didn't know you were that pregnant. And I was like, he's like, are you sure you want to go? And I was like, I got this. Let's go. I mean, I threw up like the whole plane. I was throwing up like crazy. But we were good. But when Maddox came, I had to put mission trips on hold.
Yeah.
And I remember I would cry when we drop off people to go to Africa at the airport. And I remember my mom just telling me, you need to enjoy the journey. And whatever and as she told me that, the Lord just began to speak to me during this time of change. And he told me, if you skip out on investing in your kids at this time, then when it's time for you to go back on those mission trips, they won't have the foundation that will sustain them while you're away.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's so true. It's so true. Your ministry may look adjusted during change, but the heart of that is still present, and God will bring that back out of you as you walk that journey.
Yeah,
right.
I agree. I think we all just need to know how to navigate change and to navigate it well, and just roll with those punches.
Yep,
just
roll with
the
them.
flow. Yeah.
Do it. You can do it. And if you're a mama, I know for sure you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're not a mama, men, just watch your wives. They'll help you.
Yeah,
All right, you guys have a great rest of the day. If you're watching this in the evening, then I pray you have a really good night's sleep tonight. And join us next week. We know that we're going to have a great episode for you as we wrap up the month of March. You do not want to miss it.